I'm Fernando Mastrangelo, and this is The Path, an interview series that uncovers the business of being an artist. People don't like to think of art as a business. And you know what? I get it. It kind of kills the romance of it. But that's not really realistic anymore. We're trying to grow. We're asking new sets of questions. We're using social media to expand our audience and even get new clients. So we're going to uncover some of the mysteries and strategies behind some of the most successful people in the field today. I want to share those with you so you can really see what it takes to build a successful studio. Today I'm speaking with Ladies and Gentlemen Studio, who made the move from Seattle to New York to take their company to the next level. They have a diligent method of making work, making business decisions, and a thoughtfulness about their design that you don't often find in this fast-paced industry of the New York design world. Let's dive into the show with Dylan and Jean of Ladies and Gentlemen Studio. All right, so we're here with Jean and Dylan from Ladies and Gentlemen, and guys, thank you for doing this. This is awesome. I think you guys have an amazing studio. I can't wait to jump in on this conversation. So, just to give people a little bit of a background, you guys from Seattle started the studio around 2010. And so that's almost a decade you guys have been in business, right? It's kind of like incredible.
Almost, yeah.
So I kind of wanted to start with
2020 would be.
in 2020. When did you guys actually start the
yeah, we casually. I think it was actually 2008.
We were experimenting in 2008.
Yeah,
and so
just more on the side, doing small sort of local Seattle shows or something with friends.
But you met at school?
Yeah.
Met at school.
Was that 2008? During school time or no?
No.
A little bit.
We went to University of Washington from 2000. Oh, we graduated 2005. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
And then so we're the same department for product design there, and then
that's how you met.
Tiny
that's
program
where
in the
we
School
met.
of Art. We had a class of 11.
Oh wow.
So it was just kind of very small part of a big university, but we met doing projects together in that context, and just kind of realized.
And then you formalized the company. You said, "All right, we're going to be Ladies and Gentlemen." Came up with the. By the way, we've never talked about how you came up with the name. I'm sure everyone asks you, but just for our audience or whatever, how did Ladies and Gentlemen come about?
Well, the studio, we were playing around with the idea of having a studio, but we didn't quite know what it was or what it would be. And really wanted something. It was in that time of Established and Sons, all these people were doing that
kind of cool names.
Doing something and something.
Yeah.
And it's what describes us, and is the broadest thing that can transform into whatever we want to define it as.
And we
later.
didn't want to use our names just
Okay.
because didn't want it to be so defined that it's our personal name associated with the studio, but something more general and broad, but that was still representative of so these two sides or two sort of.
Sure.
Yeah.
And who came up with it?
I think you did, right?
Yeah.
You're like, how
I did,
about Ladies and Gentlemen? I mean, it turns out to be a really good component for branding, essentially, because it kind of adds this interesting element to maybe the title of how people, when they write about you guys. Anyway, I can see how it's had so that was in 2008-ish. Then in 10, you guys, and then
made it official, a business in 2010.
Cool.
Yeah, and what was happening in Seattle at that time was the recession was sort of looming, and I think a lot of people were sort of design in Seattle is was very corporate at that time. If you were an industrial design student, you would graduate and work for either an outdoor company or electronics technology company, and but a lot of people were not wanting to do that, and so people were starting to do little flirt with the idea of independent studios. And so around that time, a lot of our friends were like, hey, you want to just make some stuff and we'll do a show? And it was super kind of thrown together, but we kind of banded together to make that kind of thing happen and see what will come of it.
Yeah, I think it was just trying to sort of do something that was speaking to us rather than working for more of the tech world that we weren't resonating with.
But, so in your training in terms of in school, people were product and they ended up sort of going into that route versus starting their own companies.
Yeah, most of them. Yeah.
We didn't even really know that
you could do this,
we
or
we were so
Yeah,
like
we did
isolated
this,
from like other forms of design when we were
Yeah.
there that it wasn't until our class went to Rome for a couple months. Our whole class went, all 11 of us, and we hung out in Rome and studied there and like learned about other ways that design and craft and like entrepreneurship can exist in a much more like free form narrative way that resonated with us so much.
What year was that?
2005.
2005.
Yeah.
So at that time, you saw, oh, maybe there's a different route.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was so like common, like everybody, you know, whether you're like
In Rome? I'm surprised to hear that.
like,
It's
even
interesting.
just like
I
more
know,
art,
yeah.
artisan. There wasn't
Was it?
necessarily design.
Okay.
It was more
artisan.
that like lifestyle, or like you saw a lot of artisan making and like make a living out of it. Granted, I don't know how well they're doing, but then it's like
Sure.
they, you know, it's more just about like doing what they really wanted to do, and then really focusing on one's, you know, specific craft.
Yeah.
Or whether it be like leather or shoe, you could you know, like you could
Sure,
go
they're
to
niche,
stores,
yeah.
yeah, really specific, and then
And they're like masters at it at this point. So you really
Yeah,
admire
yeah.
how they really fine-tune their craft.
yeah. And then we did like get to go to Milan as like we were students.
For
during
Salone
that
de
time.
Mobile?
Yeah, and that was also just like an eye-opening experience from like from Seattle when there was really not much around and at that time, and then so
Did you get to, at that point, to sort of see how big this world actually could be or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and we also like Alan Wexler is like a New York design architect artist,
Yeah.
and he was doing like studying. He was there at what was the
It
school?
was a
He got the
Rome
Rome
Prize.
Prize.
Yeah.
Oh, you got
He
the Rome
was
Prize.
there. Yeah, he was there with his wife Ellen, and we somehow like our teacher arranged a tour of their studio, and so we saw his work, which was it's just so thoughtful and poetic, and he's like an architect who's like hardly does any real buildings. They're all like conceptual and conceptual pieces that explore like the poetics of space, and I think that
Sort of inspired the sort of this idea that design or whatever could be also very conceptual.
Yeah, and
this like artistic
experimental,
side of the
yeah.
thing, and experiment.
Yeah.
So this is
And
like
he
the
really-
early stages of how you guys started to formulate your studio and the identity that it would have.
We weren't necessarily thinking about wanting to just start a studio at that time, but we were just like so inspired by
Sure.
it, and just the idea that like, wow, this, you know, this artist, architect, he was really just straddling all these different genre of like, you know, disciplines, and was able to sort of like move, you know, fluidly within that, but also like really responding like thoughtfully about each sort of aspect of it. And then, so I think for us, we were like, well, what can we do that's design? It's just always like been the back of our head.
Yeah.
Like, how can we, you know, pursue our own sort of voice and expression and work, but still have this like freedom to sort of do
And
things.
did you guys always have similar visions? Because you know,
It's not,
or did your aesthetic kind of grow together as you started to mature, or how did that?
it's always very organic, I would
Yeah.
say, but
Because it's a very particular aesthetic, you know what I mean? You have a very particular way of thinking about geometry and all of that, and I wonder if that was just, you know, you guys kind of started moving in that direction together, or was...
yeah, I mean, it's really hard to, because it's like everything happens, like thinking back, it's like always very intuitively, and it was always responding. I think a lot of the aesthetic and material that sort of like paved the way of how we, you know, currently what we see here is like we responded to the materials that was available to us and what we were looking at, and going to like a metal shop and just looking at the scraps, and then but then we're like, well, we wanted something warmer, so we integrated wood, and then also like, oh, the marble texture, the pattern, and so just had this like that feel of mixing and doing something that's like unexpected in a way that, you know, that was.
Were you both very reductive always in your thought?
Well, it was an interesting part of the like direction that it went in, because I think initially we were really into collecting vintage objects, and like that was an obsession of ours before the studio started. We would like it's kind of like an outlet for us to explore design without having a studio. And so we were accumulating all these objects from like very different time periods, like this eclectic mix of objects, but they, I think everything that we collected sort of had something in it. And so this early work of the studio, you can see the like vintage lineage really easily. But as we were doing more work, we were trying to get to like the essence of what resonated with those objects, so it became more and more reductive as we iterated on the work.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, I think we were always fascinated by like the line or a mix of things with a lot of character and like a soul to them, but that were very simple and pure at the same time.
Yeah.
So it was, but it was kind of a journey to get to the point where we were reducing it in the way that's like characteristic of the studio now.
Right. So tell me a little bit about this pretty big transition from Seattle, that scene, and coming to New York, because I think this is probably a pretty big move for you guys.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot of people like might want to make that move, or and not even from just Seattle, but just trying to come to a city like this where design is relevant. You probably have a majority of your clientele here now. How was that transition for you? And what year did you guys come to New York?
Yeah, we moved in 2015.
Okay.
So yeah, three and a half years ago. Yeah, I guess.
Wow.
And then, but yeah, it was like a really, when we started in 2010, I think the first time that we came here was for New York Now, just doing like gift shows, like it was a gift fair, and then showcasing like small products and tabletop. Yeah. But that's when we met. Like by around that time, there was also another collective called American Design Club. That was, it was a group of independent design studios and started by Kyle Mead, and then Fort Sander was part of it. Pat King was so like, and Chen was part of it, Chen and Kai, and then it was like a whole group that we all just sort of like got connected with right away, because we're all sort of, there was like happening, these like independent design collective happening around the same time. And it was like right after the recession. And I think there were just like this energy of like, well, we might as well do things, on our own, because it's hard to find a job or something like that. Or not, I mean, for us, it was just like, it was just started from like an experiment. But
then, so from 2010 to 2015, while you're still in Seattle, what does the company kind of look like at that point?
We were doing things on the side, like weekends, off hours, and we still were working full time for other companies. And then, so it was all just like more on the side, like kind of baby stuff, like, oh, we could do it and see how it goes. And then,
so then you came here and did that show.
Yeah,
and got some exposure to
every year,
maybe the vitality of the city and the market or something. Yeah,
exactly. And it was, I mean, anytime we would come to fairs and different shows here afterwards, and like every time we did something like that here, it was like a huge like boost. For the city, like, or for the studio, and so it was just like every time we came, we were liking
like sales went up, exposure went up. You're like, maybe we should.
Sales actually.
Okay,
well,
like
exposure.
And maybe okay, cool.
But yeah, we like I think it started. Yeah, we did gift fair, and then 2 years later, we did sight unseen for the first time during New York Design Week. And
what year?
13.
In 13. Okay, because I missed. I wasn't in it the year.
Oh, it was 12.
Yeah, I think it was 2012.
Wow. And that's when we did our first like furniture and lighting products there. It was just like, let's go for it.
Nice.
We sent Jill and Monica for sight unseen like miniatures. Actually, there's like right behind you. That's not the exact miniature, but we sent them like miniatures of the things we wanted to make. And like Jean shot them like
in like a booth, like a little diorama.
That's
awesome.
And just like, we want to make these things, and they were really supportive of it, and so that was like another breakthrough that happened here.
That was 2012. Was that a pretty big moment of? Were you guys working for anyone else in 2012, or was it still?
Yeah, we were still sort of like transitioning.
Still transitioning.
I was by that point like maybe like part time, and he was still working full time, like working like I don't know 60, 70 hours.
Cumulatively like
work kind of.
Yeah, I do like my 8 to 10 hours at my day job, and then like another 8 in the
Wow.
studio.
Yeah.
I don't think I could do that now.
Yeah, I know, right? It's crazy, but you have the energy back then. But so, would you say
But we
sight
were-
unseen was a big boost?
Yeah, for
to
sure.
sort
It was
of
like a
yeah.
big turning point, and then
Cool.
put us in the radar of like the New York design scene, and then also connected with really, fantastic companies that we really admire, like Roland Hill.
Roland Hill.
Teacher.
Did that come out of that?
Yeah, yeah.
So that first piece, the piece they have, which is this sort of beautiful,
the shape,
hanging
the
pieces
shape
of glass.
It was the next year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like the first products that we showed were the hanging chair, the little mini model, and then the really simple light. It's like just the bulb with the ring around it,
Okay.
or a light. And I think that like caught people's eye initially, and then the next year, I think, is when Roland Hill approached us. We started talking with Future Perfect, and
So at this point, right, you get a little bit of exposure. You're still working, but so how do you then
decide to move?
decide to or decide to just go ahead and do this full time and say, okay, we're going to quit our jobs and really pursue that?
Yeah, I think it was like a mix of like, like he was overworked, and also he's been at the company that he was previously at for like 5 or 6 years. That was like his first job.
First job.
And then
design job,
first design job, and then so we just decided like, well, let's just, and he was like at a point where he felt like he, was ready to move on type of thing. Yeah. And then I was like it's like 2013.
We're pretty slow to make like big decisions like that. So we're always, and even now, like we like to test the waters with things. Like our studio doesn't move as quickly as other studios, I think, because we want to like evolve into, like, it feels like that's the most honest way to direct the studio. Yeah. So
at least for internally, I think like more just like in a way that makes sense, like setting our own pace that makes sense for us, not necessarily fall into the expectation of external, like industry sort of expectation of where a company or a studio should be at.
That was
how are you
That
guys?
was one of the nice things about being in Seattle. Like, it was one of the. It was the nice thing about starting the studio in Seattle because it's a very comfortable place to live.
There's no pressure.
It's a comfortable place. Yeah, there's no, the entire West Coast. There's not so much precedent for things, so you can kind of create your own way. And I think that.
But that also really kind of serves your personality, is what you're saying. It's like kind of part of how you're maybe not into like grow, like the way that companies here want to try to accelerate.
Which I
people
admire,
aren't like looking.
But,
People here are always looking at what other people are doing, and that's good and bad, But like there, it was just like we made up the rules to what we were doing, and we were working out of our house at the time. Like there really wasn't a lot of external pressure on it other than just surviving.
Yeah.
So then, so Roland Hill comes in around 2013. Basically, sight unseen 2012, 13. Roland Hill. That's when you're starting to see more sales pick up. At that point, you're starting to say, okay, like this may be a viable thing.
Yeah, and I think. Yeah, we were starting to see we were still producing a lot of small like accessory objects, and that was driving the business at the time. We still do, but not nearly as much. But yeah, like we're getting traction on these like more like larger interior items, and like the fact that Jason Miller from Roland Hill like came to us and like wanted us to design something.
Yeah,
he must have been like,
we're like,
what?
Really?
I just couldn't
even.
It was like, wait, we're just like nobody's from Seattle. Like I don't know.
But then,
we submitted a round of designs to them that was like, we're gonna do something for Roland Hill, and we looked at what they had, and we we think Roland Hill will like this, and we like made things that sort of fit Roland Hill. This is a big turning point for us, like creatively, because nothing was sticking. Like they were just coming back and like,
really,
it took a while, and we were like kind of bummed, like this is not gonna happen,
right?
Yeah.
And then at a certain point, like Jason Miller comes to us and he's like, guys, like I asked you to design something because I like ladies and gentlemen aesthetic. Like I like the work that you do. Like what you're doing is designing stuff you think fits with Rowan Hill. That's not what I want.
Interesting. He caught on to that.
Yeah.
Even though you guys were doing,
We didn't even know we had an aesthetic really at that point, which is kind of a funny way to put it. But it's like, oh, like what is that? What is that? What are those ingredients to what we do? And so it was a big shift for us.
Yeah, and to sort of embrace like our own, to trust our own instinct, design instinct, or approach, and then by around that time it was still pretty undefined or pretty organic, and then so we were thinking like working with Roland Hills like designed for them, right? Like more of a licensing sort of like format, but then he sort of pointed out like just hey, I want your design, not just really anything else,
And then you guys finally came to that beautiful piece.
Yeah, that shape up with all the different
shape up.
And that's actually around the time that we were developing that like elemental shape language in the studio, and like we had a bunch of vintage building blocks that Gene was initially making these really playful like shape compositions for a necklace. And then it was kind of like this. We really liked this direction. Like it still had a lot of the character that these vintage things that were inspiring us from before, but it was so pared down to like the elemental essence of that spirit that it just felt right at that time. And with that combined with Jason's direction, it was just like this vibes with us.
Cool.
And
So we're so at this point. You also mentioned the Future Perfect. Was that a relationship that developed out of Sight Unseen as well at the same time as Roland Hill?
Yeah, because they came through. Like I think Jill and Monica walked them through the show. We met them, and then David just looked at our stuff like, I want this, and that was like the first experience. like, what? Do you want the price? Like, do you they're like, what? That was like such a really exciting moment when David just decided, I want this, and it's like.
Were you guys aware of the Future Perfect, Roland Hill? Were you aware of the design industry, the business part of it all? Like, a little bit.
I mean, we knew about those companies and like really, looked up to them as like sources for good design. Yeah, it was more from that perspective versus the business thing has always been like seat of your pants, or up until in those early times, it was just like, oh, we have to sell this stuff. I guess we need a line sheet. All the like very incremental and.
But as you were thinking about becoming an independent studio, right, where you're saying it's really about your vision and whatnot, were you thinking about how to get the work out there? Like, oh yeah, we're definitely going to need showrooms, or we're going to need to work with a gallery, or wasn't going through your mind? Okay.
We didn't know how any of that stuff worked.
Yeah. So it started falling into your lap. Like you're like, okay, roll.
Yeah, I mean, I think
talking to peers.
Yeah, I was like talking to peers up until, I mean, at that time it was mostly doing wholesale and doing the gift fair, and that was like the early half of the beginning was mostly doing wholesale and working with stores. And
right. And something you had experience with.
Yeah, which I've had.
Like her previous.
I see.
Yeah.
Previous like independent business that she was involved in was doing a lot of that
wholesale stuff.
Yeah.
Wholesale. But then I think the whole gallery, we really didn't know that much about it, and licensing didn't have any experience, and so Roland Hill was sort of the first company that we were doing licensing work sort of arrangement, and then I think it was. We just wanted to at least like try Sight Unseen, and then just show our work and then see what comes of it, and then sort of then respond to how the
response was.
Yeah, exactly. To kind of
all right, so then you come here. You
Yeah.
land here in New York.
It was like a long story short. It was like super long. But we essentially, because of all the past, all the experience showing, and then we built a network, met so many great people, and then just had this idea, had this feeling of like we want to kind of spend more time here, and then also been in Seattle. Like for me, was been there for like 15 years, and
Wow.
he sort of grew up there.
20 years.
20 years.
Yeah, and just felt like, well, you know, things are so calm and relaxing in Seattle, but then creatively there wasn't as much like energy that was as exciting as here. And then also just wanted something for us to like experience something different.
Yeah.
And then so we definitely spent like almost like a year and a half like looking at all these, thinking about these different places, Europe or Japan, or
So New York wasn't. It didn't have to be New York at some point, right? Okay.
Yeah, but we were thinking, had like a whole list, like should we
Wow.
go to Portland or is it LA? And then, but then we're like, oh, the West Coast, it's like still kind of predictable in the way that we already know it, already somewhat familiar with it. And then Japan, we went to visit, but that was too different because he didn't speak any Japanese, but I speak Japanese. And then, but yeah, and then so we just, and then ended up landed like, okay, let's do New York because it's a good in between where it felt like it was different enough in terms of the culture and the environment. And then that it's still close to Europe and that we could still like go. And so that's sort of, and then we already had a network and also still be able to fabricate stuff. Whereas if we go to like Europe or Japan, it might be a little bit challenging. As like a foreigner to, you know, in visa
to understand the vendors and all that stuff too. So when you moved, so you had already started showing with the Future Perfect, and was the piece ready and being licensed to Roland Hill by that point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was 2015 that it launched, right?
Okay.
Yeah, because we moved to New York, and then we essentially went to Milan, and then flew to New York, and that's
and that was it.
That was the move.
Yeah,
right
I
on.
mean we planned it, had like shipped our stuff to New York already.
I got it. Okay.
And then went to Milan, and that's when Shape Up launched at Roland Hill.
It's like this really nice like intersection of things happening. Like it was so exciting at that time to just have.
Well, it seems like it's because you were like very thoughtful about how every move you're making, so it kind of like
lined up.
Kind of worked out nicely.
Totally. Yeah, they definitely had like spent some time just like, okay, like what we did. You know, of course, all the past trips leading up to it, we would check out different neighborhoods. And, you know, definitely came to Red Hook area to look at, you know, to just visit studios, and then really like the vibe here and energy, and that was like our first pick. But granted, when we first like moved to New York, we were in Ridgewood, and then and so, but then ended up through Calico Wallpaper, they had a space in Red Hook that they're like, hey, are you guys interested in this?
Like, dude,
then,
cool. Red Hook.
Yeah, and we're like, yes. And then
on.
after a month of being in New York, we decided to just like, you know, just switch and move. Break the lease.
Break your lease, wow. In Ridgewood, and get started here in Red Hook.
Yeah, it was kind of, we really like felt guilty because we signed like a year lease. It was like a kind of a co-working like studio space, and then, but I think we talked to other people, and they're like, just people do this all the time. Just they'll find somebody, and we're like, okay, and like that was the best decision I think for us.
But curiously, like when that happened, like we broke the lease, and like for the next 2 weeks, a series of like horrible things happened to us.
Like what?
Like New York initiations.
Cool.
Like
little New York shock, like like a little punch in the gut.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think the
happened?
night of like the night we told the people we wanted to move out, they were mad, and my computer was just sitting on the kitchen table.
Yeah.
And overnight, the pipe like burst above and was like literally dropping a solid stream of water directly on my computer. Nowhere else. Yeah. Directly on my computer. Fried the computer. Yeah. Go out the next day, like go to our car. We had a car, and there's like a huge line of parking tickets, like for all these different variables.
For like not getting the up-to-date inspection.
all that.
Time was not. It's just like, oh my gosh.
That's like a welcome to New York. I mean, everyone kind of has to go through that. Although you guys kind of knew the city pretty well, I feel like it wasn't as much of a culture shock, or was it a bit of a culture shock?
I felt like we were also older. Like we weren't like in our early 20s and trying to like fight our way through without like any resources. So like in some ways it feels like we cheated a little bit, but it's just how it
I think we just
ended up
reversed
going.
up. I mean, I think imagining like most people come to New York when they're much younger and then really like, you know, kind of had to endure a lot of the struggle, you know, just like build up the character of there. But here, like we sort of did a lot of, you know, asked around, already knew people, and they were like, recommend, everybody had some recommendations, do's or don't do's, and and don't be by the or something like whatever. They had all these insight. So we were just always like absorbing information from people and just asking around. So had a lot of sort of kind of you know, insight into what to do and not ideas, to do.
And then you move into the space with Calico, or I mean, as neighbors or whatever, right?
Yeah.
What does it start to look like at this point? I mean, then you guys are like, okay, it's time to really start the studio in New York. And how's that? How did you do that?
When we came, we wanted to be really like rigorous. Like we wanted to like just make a lot of stuff and really sort of like dive into the scene. And so I think that was really the spirit for the first year. It was like, we're gonna explore a ton, we're going to do lots of work, we're gonna network with lots of people. Like we set a lot of energy around like just being really present in the location and
but also
really
like,
active creatively. Yeah,
and also just really explore, you know, the art and museums. I think those were the kind of things that were just it was so rich here that it's not anywhere in Seattle. You know, Seattle's just, it's living.
You know, I went to undergrad in Cornish College of the Arts. I don't know if you guys know
Really?
that, but so I spent 4 years in Seattle.
Oh
I haven't mentioned it because I was just like, but I know the city well, so I know exactly what you mean.
Capitol Hill,
I lived on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, I mean, it's cute and it's really like comfortable, but it gets a little sleepy, you know, I think. And granted, like, I think, and also people are much more sort of private and, you know, more reserved, and which is totally more the like just the dynamic and the cultural sort of landscape that sort of created that energy. But then, so I feel like here we're just like, okay, there's so much like creative energy. There's all these museums, and then,
Did you guys decide that you would do Sight Unseen again, or did you end up doing ICFF, or how did you then start approaching it? You're like, all right, we're going to make a bunch of work, we're going to network, we're going to be social in the scene, and but then
the first year we showed with Sight Unseen, it was it always yielded really great exposure. And then I think, what was it, the following year, where we like approached Future Perfect about like let's do something during Design Week and let's make it like a really impactful thing. Like that would be our way of sort of upping our game, because up until then we had just kind of sold them pieces here and there, and it was a much more transactional relationship.
I would say we went to him with like a big sort of chandelier concept called Equalizer, where it's like meant to be modular. But at that time, actually, it was like, oh, we have this light. What do you think? And like, you know, maybe it could be in the back room or something. Or
it was very late too. It was like February or something.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
like
but then he's like,
pretty close.
No, I want you guys to take the front room, and I'm like, we're all like, why?
I want you to do multiple versions of this.
Yeah, I want you to do multiple and then do all these other things. And then by that point, we were doing like a collaboration with John Hogan. He's like, can we bring in John Hogan? I think he was already, you know, excited about his work and together. And so he just really trusted us in a way that we're like, was really, really surprised and didn't expect that. And very grateful about it, because he really like, you know, trusted us to sort of give that space to let us show these new work that he only saw like a drawing of. And I think that was the kind of energy that we just don't even, it's not even, in Seattle.
In Seattle it doesn't have it, right? No, here it's like impulse,
it's,
like,
it's
you know, they see something like, I love this. But you guys were not understanding why people were reacting this way or something? You almost didn't trust yourself enough where you were like.
Or just like,
I think
we always did things so like, you know, more just on, subtly or quite, just didn't want to be like pushy about
Yes.
our kind of imposing too much in a way that's
see.
disrespectful. But then the fact that he was just like, no, just don't put baby in the corner. I think
Like
that's
one
what
thing-
Laura said. And we're like, okay.
Yeah. Cool.
So,
Like-
yeah, that was like also a big turning point
A
because
little
Yeah.
lesson, like if you want
And that
if
was
you want something, like
ask
for it.
talk
Like,
about
Yeah,
it.
I agree.
Yeah.
like
yeah.
get your stuff together and like know what you
But
want to
this
do
was
and be confident.
one
about it and ask.
chandelier that, or did you end up saying, okay, like pitched
Did a
more
series,
pieces?
yeah.
Did a whole
Yeah.
series.
Yeah, we did.
And
Yeah,
this
we
was
sold
for ICFF.
No, it's
Dur-
just for his
during
for
Design
the-
Week. Yeah,
During
in
Design Week.
Future
yeah.
Perfect.
At the Future Perfect.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Great.
So that was
That
was-
like
we
the
showed,
first year.
Like John Hogan was in that show. That was the first time Chris Stewart showed.
Oh,
we were
beautiful. I
in the
love Chris
same.
Stewart. Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
So it was like
really
it's
great.
kind of a really
Wow,
great
it's a
year,
great time. Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot. Those names have now, people have really
Totally.
skyrocketed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So that was a good turning point. What happens after that time period once you launch this collection? And
I think that it really sort of it was a turning point in terms of how like elevated our product could be and how it was perceived. And so I think it did sort of like launch us into like another level that we weren't quite at before, even though we were working with Roman Hill at that point.
sure.
It really kind of showed
And what
that
you
we
mean
could-
is like the high end market. You're
Yeah.
you're entering into like
Yeah.
limited edition type things, very
Right.
Uniquely made. Yeah.
Yeah, and custom, more bespoke, and that sort of, everything had to be custom, like especially that series e-commerce.
You saw yourselves as high end designers. Were you like, oh, this is or was it sort of like, hey, okay, we'll do this? Or was it like that?
It's
Or
sort of like that, or like, oh, there's the interest,
Mhm.
there's the audience that liked our work, and it happened to be that high end market.
Yeah.
But I think there's another side of us that also just really want to sort of express design or express work that in a way that is accessible.
Mhm.
So there is that sort of internal sort of
back and forth. Like, oh,
conversation
right. I see.
that we always
we want to
talk
explore
about.
all facets of it, right? And if those higher end venues give us opportunities to explore a concept or a material or an idea in a way that we can't anywhere else, like we want to have that at our disposal.
Right.
And at the same time, we want to do other projects that are maybe more academic or more about accessibility or mass markets. And like we want. I mean, we want to explore all of that. So it's important that.
And
At
why?
that time, we
why is
determined
that?
it was-
Why do you want to be able to hit both of those places? Do you feel like design should be, sort of a
Yeah, I
The
think
studio is about exploring design, and design encompasses all those things.
yeah?
So if we turned our focus towards one thing or another, it feels like we would be denying the whole reason of starting the studio, which was to evolve and like meander around the
But I think we always believe design is everywhere, and then kind of want to think of it in a more like design should be like a democratic thing. right?
Democratic,
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, and that I think as we start to go into that very high end market, we're like, is this too niche? And then really is it getting too narrow in a sense for us? And then even the audience that we were kind of connecting with, and then started to it was kind of around it was like fall of 2015, the first year that we moved. It was like 6 months later, then we were invited to be part of like a Furnishing Utopia, and it was like a group project that invited some designers to go to Hancock Shaker Village to do research on the Shaker culture, philosophy, and how it's such like a utopian sort of model.
Yeah.
Granted, it didn't last, but at that time, like from the late 1700s to like the 1960s, that's kind of like the height of their community, and how they really provided design and work and craft that was meant for everybody. That's part of the community.
and focused like very distinctly on a set of values.
Yeah.
So
You guys related to that. You
Yeah,
like that.
I think we were just inspired by this sort of holistic and thoughtful sort of thinking that goes behind the work, and then the actual and just the overall like approach to their way of living. And even it could be something really small like a brush, but then they design it very specifically for
Different tasks or something.
yeah,
Interesting.
task or tools and things like that. And those like we find joy in like little everyday things that are like often very utilitarian or very like nondescript or anonymous. And those some of the things that we love the most are those things. And how can we kind of start to think about these things, everyday things that could still provide people joy and yeah.
Or
I mean, granted,
accessible.
we're still like trying to figure out how we could do that, because the reality of having a studio in New York, it's so expensive. So that, I mean, like we end up selling high-end products because it does like make make a
fuels
living.
the-
It
the- be
feels,
able to-
yeah, it
to
makes it
fuel the studio.
possible,
Right.
but we don't always just want to like sell only high end to like the 1%, or also just just trying to find different ways that we could expand like our design thinking or philosophy or actual work to be a little bit more accessible.
Accessible, or
Yeah.
like exposing people to new ideas or
Sure.
like ways of living, things like that. Like that.
Yeah,
that's
or
really-
or just
really
ideas of
interesting.
how people could connect with design on an everyday, how they
Yeah.
could be more aware of the things that surrounds them or that they use, and like it doesn't have to be expensive for it to be good,
To be good, right?
But it's really just all about how one respond to like the object that they surround themselves with, and then does it bring them joy because of X, Y, are they just being more aware and yeah, that makes
So then, at what point do you guys really start to understand, ladies and gentlemen, as the identity that it starts to have now? When did that aesthetic really start to cement itself, and you say, like we are, this is sort of our language base? What's the moment that sort of happened and started to really form you guys as the company that we know now, that we're very aware of your social media, the way everything is presented, everything has a very fine tune. When did that start to really evolve? I mean, it's constantly evolving, obviously.
Evolving, yeah.
But I feel like there was a moment, like when I first saw your work, you guys were already sort of flushed out. It was like I felt like I understood your
interesting. I
company,
didn't know
but
that. Yeah,
by the time I
that
first saw
was-
your work, I was like, okay, these guys are an established young firm. So I'm curious as to when that happened, especially for you guys. Now that hearing about this, it feels like you guys were just kind of surprised that people even were responding to your work. And then you're like, oh, well, what are we about,
Yeah.
And then this starts to come, these materials, the look, all these things, start to come out.
Yeah.
Was there a piece that maybe,
I mean,
Yeah, I guess we
milestone that.
Yeah, I think it's like it was like we're saying, it's like kind of been a very organic sort of process that we are just reacting to sort of our like impulses to the material or the shapes, and oftentimes it's almost like a process that we start to be aware that it's like a kid, like when you're playing with building blocks, you're literally just like, this is what happened. This is what like you're just manipulating a physical sort of. It's like a very direct response, and then we're just playing with really elemental forms, and then started to create like a language that we weren't necessarily aware of, and then like start to notice with certain press that people were putting us into the category of like Memphis, and that was
right.
like at that time, and then we're like, well, we had so many conversations like back and forth, like. We love, of course, we're inspired by Memphis.
Sure.
Like when we were students in like studying in Rome, that's when we were like in
Discovered that
2005.
stuff,
We were already looking at like Memphis, but also we were looking at Japanese design or Scandinavian design and wherever. But we didn't want it to be like pigeonholed that we are only responding like stylistic. It's not what we do isn't just like a stylistic thing. It's more about like approach of exploration. So we started to kind of break it down. It's not just like have cookie cutters formula or just like triangle, circle, that, But even though we still naturally are drawn to these materials anyways. We can't really deny that, but that we had to sort of start to dissect our way of thinking a little bit more, and it's more about like we really just want to explore.
Yeah.
We really want to just like how to whether it be about specific physical material or it's about approach or a methodology or it's about a
Sharing
space.
in the
or
wonderment.
is
That
it
approach
about-
carries into the way you present yourself on your website, this here,
I think
yeah.
in terms of like really becoming familiar with that and like knowing that we need to flesh that out, like the move really helped do that because all of a sudden we're in the same location as a bunch of other studios practicing in the same realm.
Yep.
And we get to see how they set up what they're doing. And we understand how we're similar and how we're different, what we want to do and don't want to do, because now we have those like reference points.
Yeah.
So like a lot of what defines us from like the bullet point ways that we can describe ourselves come from the process of coming here and having to assimilate and also like look within to figure out who we really are and how we fit into this whole environment.
Yeah, or just as a whole. I mean, I think it just helps to be introspective about
Yeah,
it,
it's like
reflect like, oh, I like this because of this, and not necessarily because I have to or is expected to do something. I guess so. I guess to go back to the aesthetic thing is just like, I think it's more just like a spirit or like a kind of embedded like sort of approach or methodology that sort of kind of naturally just like pull things that we always are aware of the individual element, of course, but then holistically that it should all fit within. So I think it's like not necessarily like defining, like there's not like certain rules or only certain materials we like use, but that we have this like more of a broader sort of framework that we work with creatively within, and then maybe all these things just sort of work together, even though they're all could be very different. So we do like special project like with Muji, and then or like an installation space or that, people will be like, what do you do again?
Very
Do you do
conceptual,
products?
I remember looking at that and I thought, what a departure. Which made me start to realize that you got, obviously you've been recognized for your lighting, but that your practice is about other broader stuff.
Exactly.
And we didn't want to, like, we could, there were certain points where, like, we could totally just focus on lighting. Right?
Lighting
because
company.
do a lighting company. But we're like, we don't want to just do lighting. And also there's so many other lighting companies anyway, so we don't want to like compete with that, because at the end of the day, we don't have the facility or the like be able to invest in a level that, that really could make sense for us. So we just like, well, okay, we'll do lighting as a way to, it's just like another category. That we explore. And then, but we'll still do like jewelry, and then we'll do like installation when as like opportunity, the right opportunity comes up. And then,
so even though you kind of consciously know, you're like, lighting could be our niche and we could, probably do well from there and kind of scale maybe, you're making those decisions consciously to say, well, knowing ourselves, having some self-awareness, we're like, that's not really the approach that we want to have. So it's you guys are like so dedicated to the craft of design itself that you're willing to sort of say, well, like maybe the money is this way, or but we really want to have a broad spectrum of our practice.
And that to be able to kind of set things up in a way that we could still be flexible. We have like, if we define our, what we're interested in, being aware of what we're interested in, what draws us, and that we could just, be able to have these different facets in our practice that fuels all these things. Because sometimes the installation could inspire some products that comes out of it, or vice versa. And I don't know. So I feel like we kind of need that we started to recognize.
No, I agree.
Try to always look back at like why we did this, because it wasn't at the time, and even maybe in hindsight, like if you're talking about like just making money and having a job, like it wasn't the smartest thing to do to leave the security like of that, but we did it for a different reason, and we have to continue to look back at that, because like otherwise, why don't you just go get a job that like makes a lot of money, or like do something that maybe isn't quite as fulfilling, but it pays the bills or something. Like that's not the reason we started the company. So why should it drive the company at any other point?
No,
I mean, granted, we want to pay the bills.
You want to pay, no, you want, of course, you want to make
the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
So where you guys find yourself? We have a little bit more time. We find yourselves today as a company, as a in this partnership. You guys have. I feel like you're mature now in the design world. I'm serious. Like you guys are an established entity. You have you're selling in different locations around the globe. Honestly, from what I can tell on your website and whatnot. What's ladies and gentlemen looking like from here out?
So we've talked about the different facets of what we do. We're working in the studio to define two paths or two sort of sectors of the business, where like the product side of things can be seriously focused around making product and selling it and sharing it with people, and having a good solid system around that, which includes having more people helping doing that and focused on that. And then
so you're trying to grow to have employees.
We'll grow the product side and like build a team around that idea, and then grow the what we're calling like this like creative and service side of the studio. That's really sort of the heart of all the ideas and the heart of our
non-money making side.
Non-money making side.
Which is the one you enjoy the most, obviously.
Yeah, and like
I mean the products too. They have their place for sure.
And the creative will work with the product to help make the product and conceive of spaces that the product goes within, and different ideas that can feed the way the product side is directed. So they're not ever going to be like two separate. Non-interrelated things. But just from like a business standpoint, and as we think about the team evolving and growing, having that kind of definition, and it'll help people outside understand
what we do.
That's right. Yeah.
So,
are you guys going to be participating in fairs? What is your approach to marketing the studio at this point?
Well, those two definitions also helps figure out what those things are. So on the product side, maybe we can be. We've never done like an ICFF or like a formal trade fair, so perhaps that's the best move for the product side. We're still,
or like showrooms.
How are you guys? How are you getting new clients today, though?
Yeah,
for example,
I think it's word of mouth.
Word of mouth.
We're working really hard to like. When we work with people, like we want just this like cheesy marketing talk, but we want to have like a relationship. Like we want to build a relationship, and we work with a couple of really great repeat clients like Giancarlo Valle. Yeah. Like we really love his projects, and he involves us in a way that we can like sort of participate in the project and understand the space and build products and recommendations around that. Those are really great situations, and we don't expect that from all our clients, but to sort of we really like working directly with people so we can understand like what install difficulties they may have had, or what types of spaces things are going into, and we really want like any product that we send out to be like a really appropriate solution for whatever they're looking for, and so working with them directly is the best way to do that, and have a conversation beforehand, and hopefully that results in a really good result and another job
continuation later on. Of the cool.
Yeah.
So
and I think
direct right now.
Direct a lot of direct, and then in terms of like wholesale or like stores that we have, it's not as many as before, but at least the ones we still are working with are strong relationships that we want to just. It's like better to have like less stores, but then good, you know, really
course.
strong
Deeper relationships.
Yeah,
And
deeper.
Future Perfect is one of those, and Trioed in Paris is like a really great champion of American design. We'll hopefully be doing some more stuff with them.
Are you guys
soon.
still approaching people approaching you, or are you still
And now
doing
we
the-
start to
Yeah?
and then now we've been trying to be more organized.
Yeah.
So last year we were sort of, you know, kind of creating almost like a outreach.
Outreach,
sort of,
nice.
Yeah, like
Okay.
finding really, you know, studios I really admire, really want to work with, and start to kind of
Reach out to them.
Reach out to
Nice.
them. I mean, nothing has. I mean, slow. It's like it
Takes
takes
time.
time, you know.
yeah.
So we're hoping, you know, at least to just like introduce our work to his designer and trying to provide more of like a service and conversation about like what are their needs and finding out, you know, actually being, trying to be more like
We kind of
considerate.
learn that
like,
there's not really a shortcut there. Like you just have to like
totally.
Yeah.
And
talk
that's
to people
necessary.
and just
Open up
keep
the conversation and
momentum
keep it
going,
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, guys, you guys, I didn't know this much about you guys, so this is incredible. You guys are some of the most thoughtful designers I've met yet on this series. Honestly, in terms of the holistic way you're looking at your practice, and I'm more of a fast pace person.
Yeah, no,
I've been in
it's
New York
awesome.
for
It's
15 years,
so admirable.
so I get this.
amazing.
I'm watching you guys, and I think, wow. If not having to grow or think about growing, you grow at your own pace versus what the industry might want from you or require in some ways because of the having to sustain in New York. So it's admirable that you guys can slow it down, understand yourselves, understand your business, what you want to do as designers, and be thoughtful about it and deliver beautiful products that keep people coming back, which is really hard to do. So I really I appreciate you guys sitting down with me to talk about it. And
no, likewise. No,
Thanks
this
so
is
much.
fun.
It's been fun.
yeah, check them out on Instagram or on their website, ladies and gentlemen. It's great. So thank you guys again.
Yeah.
man.
All right,
thank
cheers.
you. Yeah.
Cheers.